Disclaimer: this video is for educational purposes only. All historical events are presented objectively based on documented historical records. More human beings died in a single battle than currently live in the entire country of Australia. Over 27 million Soviet citizens perished in World War II alone, and a significant portion of that staggering number can be traced back to one prolonged, catastrophic engagement that lasted nearly 900 days. The Battle of Stalingrad is often cited as the deadliest battle in recorded history. But what actually happened there? Why did it escalate so far beyond any rational military calculation? And what does the human cost actually mean when we try to comprehend it? In the next 10 minutes, you will get the complete picture of how Stalingrad became the defining catastrophe of the Second World War. You will learn the strategic miscalculations that drove two of history's most destructive military machines into a single urban killing ground. You will understand the staggering casualty figures from every angle. And you will encounter the detail that most casual history viewers never quite grasp, because the true scale of what happened at Stalingrad goes far beyond the battlefield itself, reshaping the entire course of the war and the modern world that followed. To understand Stalingrad, you have to understand the summer of 1942. By that point, Nazi Germany's initial invasion of the Soviet Union, launched in June 1941 under Operation Barbarossa, had already produced casualty numbers that dwarfed any previous conflict in history. The Soviet military had suffered catastrophic losses. Entire army groups had been encircled and destroyed. Millions of soldiers had been captured, and the conditions of their captivity were deliberately lethal. Germany, however, had also taken serious losses and had failed to achieve the quick knockout blow that German high command had assumed would end the war in the East before winter arrived. Adolf Hitler, against the advice of many of his senior military planners, decided that the summer of 1942 would deliver the decisive blow. The strategic objective was Case Blue, a sweeping push into southern Russia designed to seize the oil fields of the Caucasus region. German forces needed to secure their flank along the Volga River. Standing on that river was Stalingrad, a major industrial city that bore the name of the Soviet leader himself. That symbolic dimension would prove catastrophic for both sides. Joseph Stalin issued Order 227 in July 1942. The order is known by the phrase "not one step back." It prohibited Soviet forces from retreating without explicit authorization, and it established blocking detachments, units placed behind Soviet lines with instructions to shoot any soldier who withdrew without orders. This single order dramatically shaped how the battle unfolded. Soviet soldiers were effectively trapped between German firepower in front and the threat of execution behind. They fought accordingly. German Sixth Army, commanded by Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus, reached the outskirts of Stalingrad in late August 1942. The initial German air assault on the city on August 23 killed an estimated 40,000 civilians in a single day. The city was turned into a landscape of rubble, and that rubble, paradoxically, became one of the most effective defensive fortifications imaginable. Modern artillery and armor, which Germany had used with devastating efficiency across open terrain, lost much of its advantage in close urban combat. Fighting collapsed into room-to-room, floor-to-floor engagements. Soviet General Vasily Chuikov commanded the 62nd Army inside the city. His tactical philosophy was deliberate and brutal. He ordered his troops to keep Soviet lines as close to German lines as possible, sometimes just meters apart. This tactic, which Soviet soldiers called hugging the Germans, neutralized German air support, because German aircraft could not bomb Soviet positions without hitting their own troops. Chuikov understood that the only way to survive was to make the battle so close and so savage that German technological advantages became irrelevant. But here is what nobody talks about nearly enough. The factory districts of Stalingrad, the Red October steel plant, the Barricady gun factory, and the tractor factory, continued producing weapons and equipment even as combat raged inside them. Workers would finish assembling a tank, drive it directly out of the factory floor and into battle, sometimes without even painting it. The front line ran directly through industrial buildings where production and combat happened simultaneously. By November 1942, German forces controlled roughly 90% of the city. On paper, victory appeared imminent. But the Soviets had been planning something far larger than the defense of Stalingrad's ruins. On November 19, 1942, the Red Army launched Operation Uranus, a massive two-pronged counter-offensive that struck the flanks of the German position around Stalingrad. Those flanks were held by Romanian and Italian armies that were less well-equipped and less prepared for the assault than German divisions would have been. Within 4 days, the two Soviet pincers had connected, encircling the entire German Sixth Army of approximately 300,000 men inside a pocket around the city. Hitler refused to authorize a breakout. He ordered Paulus to hold the position and declared Stalingrad a fortress to be defended at all costs. He promised that the Luftwaffe would supply the trapped army by air, a promise that the Luftwaffe simply could not fulfill at the required scale given Soviet air resistance and winter conditions. A relief attempt, Operation Winter Storm, launched in December 1942 and led by Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, came to within roughly 50 kilometers of the encircled army before being halted and pushed back. Inside the pocket, conditions deteriorated at a pace that is almost impossible to describe. Ammunition ran low, then lower. Food rations were cut repeatedly. German soldiers who had arrived in summer uniforms suffered through a Soviet winter that dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. Disease spread. The wounded had inadequate medical care. The daily ration for some soldiers fell to as little as 200 calories. Men starved. They froze. They died of wounds that in any other circumstance would have been survivable. On February 2, 1943, Field Marshal Paulus, who had just been promoted by Hitler to that rank, surrendered what remained of the Sixth Army. Of the approximately 300,000 German and Axis soldiers encircled at Stalingrad, roughly 90,000 were taken prisoner. Of those 90,000 prisoners, fewer than 6,000 would ever return to Germany. Most died in Soviet captivity from the same combination of malnutrition, disease, and exposure that had killed their comrades inside the pocket. Now let us confront the total casualty figures honestly, because they are genuinely difficult to process. Estimates vary depending on methodology and which phases of the battle are included, but the most widely cited scholarly assessments place total casualties across all sides at somewhere between 1.7 million and 2 million people. Soviet military dead alone are estimated at approximately 470,000. Soviet wounded totaled over 650,000. German and Axis military dead and missing numbered approximately 300,000. Civilian deaths, which are far harder to document precisely, add further tens of thousands to the toll. No other single battle in any recorded conflict comes close to this scale of loss concentrated in one geographic location over a defined period of engagement. The strategic consequences were equally transformative. The destruction of the German Sixth Army represented an irreplaceable loss of experienced troops, equipment, and command capacity. German strategic initiative on the Eastern Front effectively ended at Stalingrad. From this point forward, Germany would fight a defensive war in the East, trading space for time, retreating incrementally westward until Soviet forces reached Berlin itself in April 1945. Stalingrad is not simply a chapter in World War II history. It is widely recognized by military historians as the inflection point, the moment when the fundamental direction of the war in Europe shifted permanently. The psychological dimension mattered enormously as well. Within the Soviet Union, Stalingrad became a symbol of endurance and sacrifice that shaped Soviet national identity for generations. Within Germany, the news of the surrender was a shock that the Nazi propaganda apparatus had not prepared the German public to receive. The myth of German military invincibility had been shattered in a way that no amount of official messaging could fully conceal. Stalingrad endures as a subject of historical study not because it glorifies warfare, but because it demonstrates with terrible clarity what happens when industrial-age military power, ideological rigidity, and catastrophic strategic miscalculation converge in a single place. The human beings who died there, Soviet and German, Romanian and Italian, civilian and soldier, were real people ground up by decisions made at the highest levels of two totalitarian systems. Understanding what happened at Stalingrad is essential to understanding why the world after 1945 was built the way it was, and why the scale of destruction achieved there must never be treated as anything other than a warning. Before you go, if you learned something new today, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel grow. Subscribe to War History for a new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.